Okay, I'm going to share screen. All right, so here is the classroom stream. So you guys just did this bit, I hope. And let's see. So here's the Unit 10 starter files. So I'm going to be starting to play around with some responsive design tonight. And we'll probably get to the point where we're doing a little bit of Flexbox. I don't know if we'll have time to get into CSS Grid tonight or not. If not, then we will have time on Thursday to do that, I believe. Or if we don't, if I think we won't, then I'll make sure to put it in a recording before that class, which should be uploaded hopefully tomorrow. So there's that. You want to go ahead and download that. And then here is the PDF instructions for CSS layout on your project. So let me crack this open. And again, this might have some stuff in it that you're not familiar with yet. Some of it you probably will be because we've done some of it. But this is due at the end of the week. We'll be starting the next and final phase of our project, JavaScript, on Thursday. There will be a bit of a crossover here. Here are links to the reading material. And I think that we took a look at this before. I'm pretty sure we did. If you just type in CSS tricks, and like the very first thing that comes up is Flexbox. I mean, their page on Flexbox, the complete guide to Flexbox or ultimate guide to Flexbox, is it's epic, right? It's mythical. It's amazing. This is the best place to learn what this stuff does. So there are two columns here. One of them has to do with properties for the parent element. So the thing that is holding the things that you want to distribute or lay out, the container, and then there are several properties for the children, the items that are going to be laid out within there. I would go through these by column, not reading left to right, but stick with properties for the parent flex container, take a look at all these guys, and then go back up to the top and take a look at the children items as well. And then CSS tricks, I bet the very next one is, yep, grid. Complete guide to grid. I think that grid can be a little bit more confusing than Flexbox can. The result, in a way, is clearer because everything has to do with laying things out kind of like these images show, like a grid, like you can specify rows and columns. It's almost as if you're building a table, except it's not a table. This is the technique that's recommended to use for overall layouts, and so that's what we're going to be doing. You can use Flexbox for the things that you saw at the end of my demo, I think in week 3, or no, not week 3, week 2, something like that. Just taking those navigation elements and just distributing them horizontally across, the parent element. And that's actually, we're going to do that again tonight. And that's great for that sort of thing. But then for the overall layout, it's recommended to use this grid, CSS grid. I'm going to put another link into the helpful links for HTML and CSS and so on. I may put links to these guys in there as well, but there's one more link that I think you guys should know about. We're using some newer, it's not super new, but newer techniques in CSS. And it's helpful to be able to know, hey, is this technique going to be supported by browsers, right? And which browsers, if so, and which browsers, if not, which browsers do I have to worry about, and so on. So this website that I will steer you toward is easy to remember. It's caniuse.com. Okay, so like, can I use this technique? And can I use covers HTML and CSS and JavaScript, some of the more commonly used features, and it's very rare that I found something that's not covered in here at all. So most search features, look at this, CSS Grid and Flexbox. Can we use these things? If it's not in the most search features, you can type it in here. Let's check out CSS Grid. And this gives you a table of what browsers support this and what versions of those browsers support it and which ones they don't. Don't worry too much about Opera Mini. The more you come to caniuse.com, the more you will realize that Opera Mini is specifically designed to not support much of anything. And they do that specifically so that they can get blinding fast download speeds in parts of the world where connections are very tenuous. So this is an extremely, you might go like, I've never heard of Opera Mini. Yeah, but if you go to the other parts of the world, it's got like over 1/3 of a billion users overall. around the world. It's actually a really, really big browser around the world, just not so much in the United States because we are all broadband here, right? Baidu, this is, I don't even know anything about this other than it's a Chinese browser and it's only a few years old. Doesn't support it. Probably don't have to worry about that one. Global usage, 0%. This one here, it's going to get a lot more usage. Even though it says 1%, that is a lot more usage worldwide. But even so, when you're seeing all this green from like Firefox, Chrome, Safari, Opera, Edge, and so on, then you're probably pretty good with it. So CSS grid layout will be fine to use. How about Flexbox? Okay, CS Flexible Box Layout Module. And yep, seeing a lot of green there. Even Opera Mini supports it, which I'm actually a little bit surprised by. So anyway, this is a really good website. Whenever you're wondering about bleeding edge or just even relatively newer techniques in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, this is a good website to go and check out. As far as I know, they've kept up to date with very, very nicely with CSS font palette. See, this I don't even know about. I've never used font palette before, so at some point they're letting me know about it. I got to check it out. So anyway, hopefully you've downloaded. Oh wait, let's see. We're still going. Sorry, we're still going over the assignment, aren't we? Okay, so let's just go ahead and take a look at what I'm going to be asking for, even though you may not know what all this stuff means yet. You will. So breakpoint. So a breakpoint is doing a media query in your CSS, which means that you have one layout that works for all sizes, all widths of screens, all sizes of screens, mobile devices, etc. And then you set up a breakpoint, set up a media query so that if the screen gets wide enough, different CSS rules will apply. And this does not, this is calculated on the fly. I mean, it's not required that someone refresh the browser or anything like that, as you'll see. If we just take the browser window and resize it like this, then we'll see the design change from screen width to screen width and so on. So that's what the breakpoint means. It means creating a media query. So far, we've done like one column layouts because I told you to, and that's all we knew how to do. And that's what we do for most layouts for mobile devices, for small devices, small screens. And then we'll set up a breakpoint so that if the screen width gets wider than a certain number of pixels or ems, that it will have a layout. So that layout will only apply to wider screens like desktops or laptops, that sort of thing. Flexbox, use CSS Flexbox to arrange your navigation links. I know at least one or two of you have already implemented this based on that old demo. If you've already done it, that's fine, but at least spend some time playing around with this to make sure you understand the technique rather than just copying and pasting. Grid, we'll do a grid layout for your pages, and that will only be done in the media query. So we will not have a grid layout for mobile view, only for desktop and laptop view. And then finally, the viewport meta. I showed this to you a while back, and then we kind of forgot about it because it hasn't been crucial to what we're doing, but it's time to get it back in there. So the viewport meta, and here's the code that you want to get in there right there. This is the code that you want to get in there in order to get mobile screens to pay attention to their own screen width. And I know that sounds weird or even silly. Sure sounded silly to me when I first heard about it. When I first started trying to do mobile layouts, I mean, it was Wild West time. Like nobody knew anything. Nobody knew what they were doing. I certainly didn't, and I kept expecting it to look a certain way, and then I would upload it to the server and try it on my phone. It would look terrible. It would take the whole design and it would squeeze it down to something that looked like a little thumbnail, and I couldn't figure it out for the longest time. And it turned out this thing right here is what I was missing, this viewport meta. And boy, when I found out about that, I was so irritated that I had to put in this one stupid line of code to get the device to pay attention to its own screen width. It turns out there's a not completely silly reason for it. I still wish we were beyond it now, but we're not, so we still have to put that in there. So that's the code. Put it right underneath your character set meta. You want to put that on all of your pages. If we get a chance, I'm not sure if this is going to happen or not, but I would love to get it so that we could actually get these projects at the end of the term uploaded to a server so that we can check them out on our phones. If we can't do that, at the very least, I'm going to try to get my demo up on the server so you can see it with and without the viewport meta to see what the difference is on a mobile browser. Okay, so that's what this is going on so far. Let's go ahead and jump in so that you guys know what you're doing here. go ahead and grab, let's see, let me get out of here. Go ahead and grab the Unit 10 starter.zip. I am recording. If you would prefer to watch instead of following along, that's fine with me. I recommend following along. I'm not going to make you guys turn in the file. I think that there's enough. Basically, I'm just going to give you guys the points for it. I'm going to assume that at some point, either during class or afterward, you're taking yourself through these exercises to do. But like if you try it and you're typing through it and something is not working, by all means, zip it up and throw it my way, get it submitted so I can let you know what's happening and then get it back to you. But otherwise, we're just going to make it optional. So download it. If you want to follow along, cool. If not, don't worry about it. At least watch. Okay, let's see. Let's get some of these guys closed here. And actually, I want to keep Can I Use open just so I can remember to get that link up there for you guys. Alrighty. Okay, here we go. I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code, and it looks like I've already got the folder. So let's go ahead and crack open that file and take a look at it with those files. So this is more or less the demo that I ended with last week. I've changed it a little bit. I had the Flexbox on the navigation just as a way of preview, saying, hey, look what's coming down the pike. I've taken that off so that we can now add it back in. Otherwise, I think this is pretty much the same. I just removed a little bit of CSS, that's all. So this is my current state of my project file, my demo file here. And so I'm going to go into here. And I'm going to be looking at the CSS here. So right now, we're going to be focused on, like the type formatting, the navigation especially, and maybe to some extent the gallery. Remember, we got on the About page, actually I've got to preview this in the browser. When we go to the About page, we have one image that had text wrapping around it. And I almost forgot to put that in until someone asked how to do it, and that's what reminded me. But there's one problem with this one, and that is if I get down to a pretty narrow width here, the text that's wrapping around gets difficult to read, right? It's in a very small block of text or a very small measure there. It's not the end of the world, but I might want to have something where either the image is smaller here or, contrary-wise, I might have it so the image stretches across the whole width here and the text starts underneath it. And then when we go to a larger size, then it goes back to this floating where it has plenty of room over on the side for it to work. What else is going to happen? Well, we're actually going to use Flexbox on the navigation for a vertical layout of these gallery items. So right now, let's go and open up this page. This is which one? This is the About. And so let's see, what was I just looking at? I was just looking at, I'm going to close this guy here. Yeah, the navigation here, it's just a series of links, anchor links inside of the nav element. I think I've told you before that we used to very often put those in ULs with each of these in an LI, and that you'll still see a lot of developers do that. I don't personally do it anymore, I used to. And that way, I mean, if you have this in a UL with LIs, then this would already be arranged vertically, right? Because that's what ULs do. They do list items, each one has its own line and so on. But now that we're not doing that anymore, it starts off just like this. It's got a space between the navigation links, and that's it. Otherwise, they're next to each other like this. It's usable. I mean, it's not a problem. It's just not very nice. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to get these displayed vertically. And we're going to use Flexbox to do that. You can use Flexbox to arrange things and distribute things vertically as well as horizontally. And then we're going to put in a media query so that when we get out to a certain width here, that switches back to the CSS Flexbox that we had before about distributing these guys horizontally. I'm going to put in 3, I think, breakpoints in this one. In the assignment, you don't need to do any more than 1. Of course, you can experiment with more if you want to. But I'm going to have another breakpoint where we switch to a grid layout where maybe this header and the navigation are over here on the left. And then this whole main element and the footer are next to it going over on the right-hand side here, so 2 columns basically. And then a final breakpoint for wide screens, probably at 1280 and up, where it's the same kind of thing, 2 columns, but just adjusting things so that we're, what's the right way to put it? Just so we have a little bit more control over widths and heights and so on, especially widths. If you're down here and you can kind of let grid layout do what it wants to, and you don't have to worry about it so much. Things kind of fit together. Once you get into wider screens like this, it works. It just doesn't look quite as good. Some of the elements wind up being really small and tucked off to the side. You have to have a little bit more control over it. So we'll do all of those things. And I think actually, despite what I was just saying, we'll do this, then we'll do that, and so on. Let's get the breakpoints in there first before we do anything. And I'll show you what those look like. And we'll show what it, how it works before we do anything design-wise with it. So this is all of my, I think of this as all of the mobile CSS, or just the basic CSS or the default CSS. This is the stuff that's going to apply to all of my designs, however wide or narrow the screen is, right? If I change this and move it out, all those rules are applying at all widths. Now, if I apply a media query here, I'll be specifying a width beyond which these rules will apply, and it won't apply at less than that width. Now, there's 2 different ways you can do this. Actually, you can do a min width or a max width, but we're going to do a min width, and this is what's called a mobile first approach, which is what we're doing, which is the very first design that you do is intended for mobile, and then you add media queries in order to create special, like wide screen layouts. So let's go ahead and take a look at what our media query looks like here. Zoom in a bit. And so it's this guy right here. It starts with @media. And it's called that because there are actually different kinds of media that you can specify. It's not just screen. I mean, screen is what we wind up using, I don't know, 99.5% of the time. We're intending this for screen presentation. Almost always. That's what websites are for. But there is also a print media query. You can specify style sheets that will only kick in when a document gets printed. Now, that used to be a big deal. Now it's not quite such a big deal because browsers have gotten a lot better at creating print versions of documents themselves. Well, sometimes they blow it, though. And in that case, it's good to have some control over it. So anyway, that's why it's called @media, because there are other media that you can use. There's actually one for handheld, but it's not recommended to use it anymore. It never really wound up getting used as far as I know. So you see @media screen, and then you have options that you can do in addition to that. So yeah, this is for screen presentation, and I'm going to have something in parentheses here. And then all of the CSS that I'm going to do is going within this code block, as if this were a property in CSS. It's not, but it uses the same kind of logical structure, basically. It's a code block here. So what goes in the parentheses? Well, this is where we specify how wide the screen needs to get to before these rules will start to take effect. And this is where you can use a CSS property like min width and colon and give it a value. Now, I've long been in the habit of using ems for my measurement. Well, not long, I mean the past few years at least. Most people, I think, will use pixel-based layouts, so you'll see something like, okay, yeah, 640px. And maybe I'll go ahead and start with that and then switch over to ems and show that there really isn't much difference whichever one you do. You guys can use whichever one you want. And to begin with, let's just test this thing. I just want to see if it works. I want to create a style that will only apply when the screen is 640 pixels wide or wider. And so let's go ahead and do something like do the splat selector like so. So this should take all the text and turn it red, unless there's a more specific selector up here that's blocking it. But let's go ahead and try this. And if it doesn't work, that's the first thing I'll try. I'll probably do a more specific selector like hash page or something. Let's try this. So I'm going to save this over here and refresh. And then I'm going to slowly pull the screen out and see how all the text turns red past a certain point. So I know that I just got wider than 640 pixels. Now this is, again, this is being calculated on the fly. It's not like it has to keep listening for it or something, or you don't have to tell a JavaScript timeout function to keep going over and over again. CSS is constantly evaluated by the browser. And so it just works. Yay. So it's working. Now let's check out, I'm just going to do the ems here. So this is the equivalent of 40 ems. Not 540, but 40 M's. That would be a lot of M's for a breakpoint. And you'll see it does just about the same thing. In fact, I think it is exactly 640 pixels. So where's the M's come from? Well, remember, M is the default size of your type. That's what the definition is. So 40 times 16, I believe that does come out to 640 pixels. But if someone comes along and resizes it not by moving this, I mean, let's face it, most users do not sit around doing this going, oh, cool. But users might zoom in and out. So if I'm here below the breakpoint and I zoom out, for instance, see how the text got red? Even though I haven't actually resized the browser window. So I've been operating on the understanding that you doing your breakpoints in M's instead of pixels facilitates this sort of thing. Now, that's not to say it would necessarily break if we were to switch this back to 640, but everything I've read says that your breakpoints will be more flexible and more resilient if you use M's instead of pixels. So I do, but you don't have to. So let's say I'm going to have more than one media query, which is common. Again, you guys don't have to, but I'm going to do a couple more here. I'm going to do another at media screen and min width. And I'm going to do 60M this time. Oops. I always want to put a semicolon there, but you don't. We also did not put the brackets inside the parentheses. There we go. And let's do another one. Color green. And I'll go ahead and put the third one in here, and then we'll test them all out and see if we've even got screen width enough to try them all. I'll do that media screen and min width 80M. So I'm just going up by 20 M's each time. So now let's do something else here. Maybe color, I don't know, blue, all right, like so. So the 40M is 640 pixels. This will be twice that. This is 1280 pixels, and this is, what is it, 760, I believe, right in the middle. These are fairly common breakpoints, not ubiquitous by any means, but you do see these a lot, either in pixel or M measurements. Okay, so here I am with my mobile view. I get to my first media query, and the text turns red. Give myself a little more space here. I hit the next media query, and the text turns green. And then I hit the next media query. Oh, good, I have enough room, and we've got blue. This is the last thing you'd want to do, right? Because blue text, everybody knows that's supposed to be clickable. So don't make your text bright blue like that. Dull blue is okay, like what we've got down here. So that's what the media queries are. More or less, that's what you want to do. You do occasionally see max width. I do not recommend ever using those. I don't think there's any reason for it. It's going against the mobile first approach. It's specifying desktop designs before the mobile designs, and that's not what you want to do. So min width, I mean, it should work for just about everything unless you wind up doing a print media query at some point. Let's see, what else about them? Okay, so the other thing that you need to know about these is probably something that you can sense if you just take a look about this, what we've got for our example. So in the mobile view, I get out to the first media query. What's changing about the design? Well, the only thing that's changing about the design is switching this color red. That's the only thing. All the rest of the CSS gets carried through, right? We've still got this kind of layout. We've still got the padding and the background colors here. We've got whatever spacing got put into the header here. We've still got the image floating right. We've still got the footer centered down here. Everything is staying the same except the thing that we changed. So that's important to remember is that you only need to put the stuff in the media queries that you want to override, that you want to change from your previous design. You don't have to like start from scratch and redo the whole thing. Thank goodness. You only have to do the stuff that you want to override. That's what it's all about. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these guys here. So that's the first piece of the puzzle, is figuring out how media queries fit together. And this is just an introduction. So I'm only going to be asking for one media query, so you'll have one design for mobile and maybe one design for like a laptop or tablet view or something like that. Any questions about media queries and what they are there for? Okay, cool. They're pretty fun. So enjoy when you start playing around with those. Okay, so I'm going to back up a little bit here, and we'll start taking a look at Flexbox here. So I'm going to have, and this I'm going well at beyond or before the media queries up here. So I'm going to be doing the first Flexbox just for this mobile view, and then the next Flexbox at this 40M is going to be, you can think of it for like tablet view or wide mobile view or whatever. So let's go ahead and do the navigation here first. So I've kind of stripped this down except for the basic formatting. This is usually what you want to have in your mobile view. It's just the most basic formatting that you want to apply to all different views. So I'm going to go ahead and put in a selector for the nav element. And of course, that's the element that's holding those anchor links in place. It's the semantic bucket for those anchors. And let's just go ahead and put a display flex on it. And let's see what happens. I won't do anything else for right now. Just nav display flex. And I go back over here and refresh. I'm in mobile view now. And the only thing that happened is that it took away the spaces from in between those links. Now let's take a look at our markup here. Let's see what this looks like. Make sure we're on the same page just for fun. About page. And so here are our anchor links. Remember what we were saying about white space in HTML a while ago, that a new line or tabs or multiple spaces all add up to a single space in the painting of your page in the browser window. So for instance, I'm actually going to take this and I'm going to get rid of that display flex. So in the browser it goes back to this, and then watch what happens here. All I'm going to do is there's all this white space between the closing of the first anchor and the opening of the second anchor, right? We've got a new line, and then we've got a bunch of tabs in here. And if I get rid of that, I'm just going to do it in that one spot. Save it and go over here and refresh. See what happened there? It got rid of that extra space. So that's how white space is treated in HTML documents, in markup documents. All that white space, if there's a whole bunch of white space, like spacebar, tabs, new lines, carriage returns, all that stuff, it gets reduced down to a single spacebar space, and that's what happened there. So if I Z that and get back over here, it comes back again. But now in the CSS, as soon as you get into doing a display flex on this, it's getting rid of that. It's no longer paying attention to the white space. It's almost like it's taking this stuff out of the ordinary content flow of the page. Not quite. Taking something out of the ordinary content flow of the page is like giving it an absolute or fixed position somewhere where, like if you put it somewhere, it'll actually appear above another element and covering it up and so on. We can take a look at that at some point next week if you guys want. It used to be a much more commonly used technique than it is now, I think. Display, or rather, position absolute, position fixed, position relative, those guys. But it doesn't take it out of the content flow, but this is no longer being treated as regular HTML now, at least in terms of how the white space is handled. So I'm going to take these and I'm going to put them into a column here. So this is going to be a flex flow, which is a combination of two different properties. There is flex direction and flex wrap. Maybe let's go ahead and do those separately at first so we can see them working. So I'll do flex direction and let's say column. So remember, we can do flexbox for vertical arrangement as well as horizontal arrangement. And if I go over here and refresh, it takes those and just knocks them up. So like this is all you have to do. If this is all you want to do, then boom, you're done. Display flex, flex direction, column, and it takes these guys and puts them each on their own line. Now, there is something that is often not used for the column flexbox, but that is very important for the row flexbox, and that is row, or flex wrap rather. Flex wrap, and basically you tell it whether you want it to wrap across multiple columns or rows, or if you want to do no wrap, then you can tell it not to wrap. And this is what you normally do, basically. Like I said, it's not going to be that important here. There's not enough content here that's not being contained within, so it's not going to like start wrapping across multiple columns. But as soon as you start arranging things in rows, there's a lot of possibility that things may start wrapping up along multiple columns, and that's when you need to remember to make the no wrap here. Now, it's kind of funny that we wound up with this particular property or value right here, because I just made a big deal in the recording for today about naming conventions of CSS and HTML and HTTP, and saying, yeah, whenever you put two words together, you always put a hyphen between them in CSS and HTML and HTTP. And here's an example where we didn't, right? It's not no dash wrap, it's just no wrap. So there are always exceptions. Some HTML and CSS are both actually fairly consistent. There's only a few exceptions, like this no wrap thing that for some reason they decided was one word instead of two. Later on, if you guys get to know PHP, at some point you will wind up pulling your hair out in absolute exasperation for all the insane variety of naming conventions that get followed sometimes, but not all the time. It's insane. And JavaScript is pretty bad too, but not as bad as PHP. But HTML and CSS are actually pretty consistent, but not in this one case. So if anyone felt like giving me a hard time about that in regards to today's recording, you're absolutely welcome to. You're totally justified. Okay, flex wrap, no wrap, even though it doesn't matter so much for columns, usually. Now these two, instead of deleting them, I'm going to go ahead and put them into a comment block here. You can always get them back there. These two have a shorthand, just like the font shorthand for font size, font style, and font family, which is just flex flow. And you can put in those two values. So I can say column, no wrap. And that works exactly the same way. If I refresh over here, there's no change, right? And so that's what you usually wind up doing, just because it's simpler to remember one property instead of two properties. And later on, we'll want things to go vertically instead. We'll do flex flow row, no wrap. Or sorry, we want things to go horizontal instead, right? And we'll do row, no wrap. So that's it for this. Let's go ahead and do... Let's see. I'm surprised that this is showing up in the middle here. I want to do something to get them over on the left-hand side. I think I'm going to take off the center alignment of this. For this really narrow mobile view, like for people with really small screens, I think I'm just going to align everything on the left-hand side, with the exception of like this guy down here, because it's all alone. I think that's fine in the center. But these guys here, I might just go ahead and align these on the left side. So this is easy enough. Page footer and H1. There we go. So text align center, I'm just going to take the H1 out of the selector here. And so, this guy will go over to the left, and then this guy will stay centered. I think this is the only one I want centered for this really small view. And then let's see, what do I have to do in order to make this work? What did I do before? Flex. I thought I had all these in my notes, but I guess I do not. Let's go ahead and tackle the nav A here. And actually, you know what? I think we'll be able to put it right here in the nav, if I'm not mistaken. And if I am mistaken, then we'll be able to go to that CSS tricks page and find out right quick. So I think I'm just going to be able to do an align items. This is another flex box property. And put align items start. If that doesn't work, I might have to do flex start or something like that. And boom, there we go. So yeah, I was right. So basically align items, there's two different ways that you can kind of align stuff that's inside a flex box. One of them is justify contents, which will arrange things along the, as it say, the axis of the flex. So right now it's flexing vertically. So if you wanted to arrange things vertically here, you would do justify contents, but the align items goes kind of perpendicular to the axis of the flex. So the flex is vertical, and so we used align items in order to align things going horizontally the opposite way. So let's see, I think that's it for this one. And let's do... Oh, you know what? That's what was happening down here. It's because we have a text align center. That's why. That's why. So we actually don't even need this. It's good that we demoed that, but if we just take off text align center, there we go. That'll do the same thing. But that is a good one to know. So actually, let me go ahead and put that back in. I'm just going to put it in a comment. So it was align items and start. That's what it was. I'm going to comment that out as unnecessary. There we go. Okay, cool. So we've got them vertically for right now, and let's go ahead and space them out a little bit. Maybe put a rule between each of them. So for this, we'll go ahead and tackle the nav A themselves, and I will do let's do some padding, I think. Now I want to talk about a little bit more about the box model properties here, because so far what we did last week with this is we just did like one property or one value. So we set padding around the whole thing. So I want to do like 1M here, and boom, it does put them like space them out here, but it's also pushing them away from the wall. So let me show you at least one example of how you can do different values in here. So the order in which you can use these is top, right, bottom, left. So to put multiple values in here. So if I put 4 values in here, the first one is for padding top, the next one is for padding right, the next one is for padding bottom, and the next one is for padding, the last one is for padding left. You can do whatever you need to in order to remember that. Some of my students have said, yeah, it's like a clock. You start at noon and go around clockwise. To me, I remember it with kind of a fake acronym where it's TRBL. And my acronym is of sorts is I'm going to be in trouble if I don't remember this, right? TRBL, trouble. So once I thought of that, or if someone told it to me or something, I never remembered it, or never forgot it again after that. So let's go ahead and do some different paddings here. So let's say the top is like 0.5M, and then the right is going to be, well, we won't be able to see it on the right, but I'll go ahead and put in a value over there anyway. And the bottom, we'll do like, I don't know, another M, and then left, let's do 2 M's. And I don't know how visible this is going to be, because padding is probably the least visible out of all the box model properties, or one of them at least. So yeah, we won't even be able to see it, but if we had backgrounds on each of these, you'd be able to see there's a different amount of, like, let's go ahead and put a background on, let's see if that helps. Let's see, background. And, I don't know, silver. That's not going to be very good looking, but that's okay. And yeah, we're still not going to be able to see it. Okay, I'll come up with a better example for the recording that I do next. But in any case, just know the technique. Believe me, it's working. It's doing 4 different values here. So this is the top, this is the right, this is the bottom, and this is the left. Okay, I'm going to comment that one out and show you another one, which is top, and then let's see, no wait, so I'm doing 3 of these. So this is top, yeah, and then the next value is left and right, and then bottom. So if I had 3 values, so let's say I have padding, and then I do like 1M, and then 2M, I'll look at comma 2M, and then 0.5M, something like that. Boy, I'm having trouble typing tonight. There we go. So this would be this arrangement. So this one will be for top, this one will be for left and right, and this one will be for bottom. These are all useful in different ways. I'll comment that one out. We'll do one more. And this is for if I only have 2 values. And this is going to be top and bottom, and then right and left. For these guys, if I just have 2 values for these, that's what it'll do. And this one, I think you will be able to see. This is, let's see, taking this off of there. So what I want to do is just add padding top and bottom, but not left or right, because I don't want this pushed in from the wall. And so that's where all this is leading, is that I can put in 2 values, one for top and bottom, and then another one for left and right, which is going to be 0. So let's once again do this padding. And top and bottom, I'll do, well, do 1M for now. It's probably going to be too much. And then for left and right, I'll do 0. So you see this a lot in CSS, where you've got 2 values for some kind of box model property, like, you know, padding, margin, border. In fact, I may have already done this up here for the page. And yeah, here we go, margin 0 auto. So this is a little trick to get this to center within the page. like this. You see how the overall page div is centered instead of hugging the left-hand side, giving it a margin of a top and bottom 0 and left and right auto. So they fight with each other and they use up all the available space and it winds up centering your design. To this day, I don't know whether that was planned in CSS or whether that just wound up happening by accident, but it certainly is a happy thing. So that's what it means. This is the same thing as doing like 0 auto for top, right, bottom, and left. So the 2 values for it, and that's what I'm going to do here for this padding. So we've added padding top and bottom, but not on the left, so it doesn't get pushed in from the left wall at all there. And do one more selector here. So we've got nav A and nav A hover, which is what gives us these underlines when you hover over them. Used to be you had to use JavaScript for that sort of thing. Now it's built into CSS, which is nice. And I'm going to do nav A plus A. And I think you guys probably remember from this from when we were doing basic type formatting. We did P plus P, which meant only style a paragraph if there's another paragraph preceding it. And this is the same thing. Only target an anchor if another anchor is preceding it. So if I do color red on this guy here for the anchors, see how it only grabs these 3 because this is the one anchor out of that group that does not have one before it. That's what that one's useful for. So let's go ahead and do a border top here. And it's just going to be thin, solid. And the RGB, let's see, the colors that I'm already using here. I see this is blue, isn't it? So I think we did, yeah, 200, 220, and 240. Like so. So something close to white, but just a little bit bluish. Let's get some links in there. Now, I know that this is ugly right here, but you would do something more with this afterwards. Considering this is a mobile view and you want to get this out of the way because you're short on real estate on a small screen, right? You would probably have like a pancake stack icon up here. You know what I'm talking about with the 3 lines up there. And then when the user tapped on it, this guy would drop down and making this navigation available. And then when it wasn't in use, it would tuck back up here, right? So we're not getting to that point yet. I don't know if we will get to that point this term, but that's the ultimate idea. But this is usually how you start this sort of thing. Before worrying about, okay, how am I going to create a widget to get this navigation tucked up out of the way when it's not in use, you go ahead and design the navigation first and figure out the other stuff later. So I've done that here. It's not incredibly beautiful, but it'll work. All right, and the last thing I want to do now is show you guys a media query in action by changing around this flex box here after our first breakpoint in our first media query so that these are now horizontal instead of vertical. And as we do, remember what we were talking about. When you do a media query, you don't have to start from scratch. All you have to do is override the stuff that you want to override. I think I can get rid of these comments here. So that's what I'm going to have to do there. So for instance, the nav already has a display flex on it. Stop it. God, this mouse. Stop. Stop. God, it won't stop. I need to get on a mouse. This is crazy. Okay, so the nav here already has display flex on it. I do not need to do display flex again down here. If you do, it'll just make your page less performant because it's needing to parse through and render stuff that it's already rendered. You don't have to do that. So what I do want to change is the flex flow. So right now it's set to flow through a column in no wrap. I want to change that to row no wrap so that it goes across instead of up and down. So in my first media query, and I think it's a good idea to go ahead and duplicate your organizational comments. So right here I've got a comment showing, yeah, this is where the navigation stuff starts. And above that one I'm going to get rid of some of the extra returns, but type formatting, and then what do I have up here? The structural. To whatever extent possible, I'm going to be duplicating these in my media queries. That just makes it so much easier when you're bouncing around code to figure out what the heck you're looking at and what you're overriding and what you're not. So I've got, yeah, I've just the 4 big sections. I mean, there's the big structural elements, and then there's type formatting, and there's the navigation, and then there's the gallery and images, and that's it. So to whatever extent I need, I'm going to use those same comments down here. So let's go ahead and select for the nav. And remember, it's already got the display flex on it, so all I have to do is change the flex flow to row, no wrap, like so. And when I refresh over here and go back and then resize this, and now things are going across again. So this is where we have to start adding some other things. First of all, it's got this border top that we were using that made perfect sense here, I think, but doesn't make much sense here. I want to space these guys out and then give them that pipe on the left-hand side instead of having one above. So there is some stuff for us to override here. So first things first, let's go ahead and get nav A selected. And we're going to do the flex 1 trick that we did last time. And someone was asking, so what is that? So it's a combination of flex grow and flex shrink, which means, any flex grow, if you put it on one element, it gives it the ability to grow beyond its ordinary allotted space. So if you've got 5 elements, they're going to take up 20% space each. But if you have 4 elements only, then whatever you put flex grow 2 on it is going to allow it to be larger than the other ones. Flex shrink is the same thing in reverse. If you're giving all of them the same value for flex grow and flex shrink, then it's going to space these guys out along here. Just a flex 1. I'm also going to take this off. So this is my nav A plus A. And let's see, border top, none. We'll override that. And instead, we're going to give it a border left. Only for A plus A, right? Let's see, RGB, and let's see, I think it's this guy right here. Is that right, 230? No, I get this one. Let's go ahead and get these guys here. We'll just copy and paste them. There we go. And let's see, border left. I need to give it a style. All I did was put in the color, but you want to say, I think actually all it needs is the width, I believe. No, it needs a style too, so I need to tell it solid. So thin solid RGB, and now it works. So yeah, it does need to have those properties. Let me just get rid of the thin. Maybe you can do without that. It seemed to me like you can do without one of those. Yeah, it just needs the solid. It needs the style in order to display it all. But look, it gives me kind of a nasty, ugly one there, so I'm going to go ahead and put in thin as well like the other one. I'm going to override the padding on this one. Give it a padding of 1M0, which is really giving these guys too much space here. I'll get rid of that. That's just going to be on nav A. Let's do padding 0. Okay, that makes more sense. And I wonder if I can get away with just doing the text align here. Let's give it a try. Nav A text align center. I can't remember how I did it before. Yeah, that's all it needs. So boom, there we go. So again, just overriding just the stuff you need. If you find, you can look back and forth in your code, you're refactoring. What that means is, well, trying to shorten and concise your code and make it easier to read. What it almost always means is getting rid of duplicates, where you've got duplicates of anything. In procedural or functional programming, of course, you're taking any repeated values and storing them as a variable. But in this case, it's just like, what am I putting in here that doesn't need to be in there? And to some extent, combining selectors and so on, like we looked at before. So only overriding what we needed to override in here. And with that, with an extra 10 lines of code or so, in our first media query, we've got these guys. So the navigation is vertical flexbox, and then get out to about 640 pixels, and it turns into a horizontal one. And obviously, as soon as we do this, this thing is sticking out like a sore thumb. I'm going to go ahead and fix that right now. I think this was under type formatting. And all we got to do is do the H1 text align center, like so. And you might be looking at this and thinking, oh wait, we're already seeing some possibilities for combining selectors and maybe reducing a line of code. So yeah, I could. I've got the text align center on nav A as well, so if I wanted to, You could turn this into a compound selector with a comma, nav A, and then just get rid of that down here. And it should work. So that's refactoring. In general, you want to keep your code as short as possible. I had one student a long time ago was presenting, and he boasted that he had 10,000 lines of code. I said, what are you, crazy? Don't tell anyone you got 10,000 lines of code. That's not a good thing. But yeah, make it as short and sweet as possible. And I think that's about it for today. We're already at 7:25, and we've done the first part of it. So we've gone over Flexbox using a column, first off, and then using a media query to have that switch to Flexbox with a row. I wonder if we took off no wrap and turned this into wrap, if we'd see an example of this wrapping across multiple lines. And no, in this case we don't, probably because of the Flex 1. But at some point I'll show you if you have FlexFlow row wrap and you've got too many elements to fit, they will start wrapping onto multiple rows. And sometimes you want that. Like if you're building a big gallery of big gallery grid of images, and you just want it to keep flowing down as as many elements as you've got, then you would want to have wrap on that. Most of the time I think you do no wrap instead. Okay. Any questions about any of the stuff that we just did? Yeah, go ahead.
For example, could you show the website again?
Yeah.
So if you were to go on the smallest one here, what would you do with that picture? Would you were talking about it earlier.
Oh yeah.
Would you leave it like that? Would you maybe move it up or bottom? Would you maybe shrink it on one of those CSS lines? Or
well, hopefully
what can you do?
Hopefully I don't have to mess with the HTML. There are going to be, like in our case, we actually have control over the HTML, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes the builders of the markup will hand it to you and say, okay, now do the design with CSS, and you're expected to not touch the HTML at all. I've seen that happen more than once. So I think that what I'll do is I'll just make it so that this stretches the full width on the small width, and then it'll go back to this when it hits the first media query. So let's go ahead and fix that real quick. So it's just this one image, and it's the one that has the float property on it. By the way, I was telling you guys, I was kind of hinting about this earlier when I was doing the recording. Some of you may have tried this already. If you click on any element in the browser and go down to Inspect or Inspect Element, depending on what the browser says, then this takes you to the DOM where it shows you the browser's picture of your HTML, which can change, unlike your HTML. And if you've got one of these selected, then you can go over here and see what the CSS is that's been applied. And that, by the way, is exactly how I saw if you guys were using the right selector for the body. I mean, if I select the body here, and then I can actually see exactly what's been applied directly to the body versus some other element. But anyway, this image here is the reason why I was just opening that up. So I go to Inspect, and I can see that this has the class of float on it. So that's what I'm aiming for here. And it's this guy right here. So I think to start with, we'll just do float, and then we'll do a width, 100%. Like so. And then refresh, and it's going to look real ugly out here. This is a big pixelated version of my little thumbnail image. Down here, I think it looks fine. I'd probably put an extra margin on the bottom. So I've already got a margin left. Let's do a margin bottom. Actually, let's do it, since we've been talking about multiple values, let's go ahead and do it. So I want a margin left and a margin bottom. So I do top, right, bottom, and left. Remember treble, TRBL. And, oh, because I have margin left, you want just the margin property. There we go. So that pushes that down a little bit. So now I just want to make it so that I override that when we get out to the first breakpoint, which is, well, wherever it is. So we don't get this big nasty image. So that's going to be in here. And now I have to do a section for gallery of images. And I just need to override that on the float class selector. Can't type tonight. There we go. And so up here we did the width 100%. So how do you get it back to the original? There's two ways that you can do that. And the one in this case that I would probably do, width auto. And that should take it back down to its actual width. Yeah, it does when we get out here. And then just the 100% when we get into the smallest size. So I think something like that would work. The other thing that works is to do width, not inherit, but what is it? It is initial. So what this says is, okay, take whatever this property is and make it back before I messed with it, before I did anything with it. This doesn't always work. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, and I've never been able to figure out exactly why, but I think that this will still work for this one. Yeah, it takes it back to the initial value, so either one of those will work okay. So I think that's okay now. I don't like this extra margin down here, so I'm also going to change that. Margin. And let's see, we did top, right, bottom, left before, and all we need to do is take off the bottom, so it's going to be 0, 0, 0 for bottom, and 1M for the left. There we go. Yeah, so I think that's how I would tackle that one. I would probably use a larger image than this thumbnail because it's already looking pixelated and nasty. But yeah, it's not so bad.
Cool, thank you.
Absolutely. Good question. Other questions? So yeah, like I was going to say, I think this is, to me, this is the fun stuff. It's doing the layout. It used to be the hard stuff. In CSS2, man, there wasn't a whole lot you could do. Back then, there was a practice of doing your layouts in tables, and I don't mean the CSS display table property, which actually is kind of cool, but actually building your HTML into a big table so that you could get things next to each other. And I did it. We all did it. I did it for years. Rocked those table layouts for a long time before CSS caught up and we were actually able to do something else. We would have preferred not to do it at all, but clients insisted, yeah, I need this layout. And the only way to get it to work that could work the same in all browsers was to do a big table layout. So that meant going into your HTML and putting in a lot of junk, putting in a lot of boilerplate markup that really should never have been there. And not only that, but it made mobile views next to impossible. You had to use like JavaScript to say, okay, if someone was coming from a mobile device, we're going to send you off and you're going to see a different index page that doesn't have all these tables and junk in them. Now, thank goodness we're beyond that, and we can just do the simple, clean page of markup and use media queries to get different designs in there. We can use Flexbox and Grid in order to get layouts in. It's such a cleaner world now. It really is. It's just so much nicer. I'm not the only one who said this. I and several of my colleagues and people that I've talked to, around 2008, 2009 or so, we were all feeling very bored with web design and web development. We were all kind of looking into other things that we could do. Not all, but I mean, a lot of people I knew felt the same way that I did. And then HTML5 came along, CSS3 came along at the same time. We started thinking about mobile first designs like what we're doing here. And all of a sudden it got fun again, and it has been fun ever since. The fun has never gone away. It's so much closer to the way it ought to be now. So I will go ahead and stop the recording here.